Created by a necessity for more powerful and versatile machines, the Doe Triple D was the amalgamation of two tractors to create one high-power, four-wheel drive unit, and ended up as one of the strangest tractors ever to be made. The idea of such a machine stemmed from the mind of farmer-turned-inventor George Pryor, who, faced with a lack of powerful machines on the British agricultural market, turned his hand to creating his own. Pryor, who was based in Navestock in Essex, started work on the idea when he found his crawler tractor, which alongside being slow and restrictive, struggled in the heavy clay on his land. In 1957, he started work on the first of his prototypes by joining together two Fordson major tractors with a beam to create a machine with 100 horsepower. At the time, British tractors scarcely topped 60 horsepower, with popular units like the Fordson Supermajor topping out at 54. A pair of Fordson Majors was chosen by Pryor as they were a simple, tough, reliable design with enough room under the sump for the conversion. They were also in plentiful supply, and so second-hand units were easy to come by at a good price. Pryor then purchased two diesel power units to replace the vaporizing oil units on his tractors and started work on the prototype. Initially, Pryor kept the front wheels, but after realizing a great deal of the unit's power was being wasted on just pushing them along, around 20%, he ditched them in favour of a turntable unit to provide steering duties, eventually deciding on a 2-foot turntable with a centre floating plate carried on heavy-duty steel roller bearings, connected to 4 controlling rams arranged in pairs of 2. These pairs gave smooth steering action in the middle of the units, with Pryor eventually being satisfied enough by the conversion to file for a British patent in 1958, the same year field trials began. Early field trials proved the unit to be a success, with the two 52 horsepower diesel units providing over 100 brake horsepower, whilst travelling over twice the speed and pulling twice the weight Pryor's old crawler could muster. Talk about the sight of such a machine quickly spread around the local area, and it is around this time that the unit found the attention of one Ernest Charles Doe. Pryor was already a long-standing customer of Ernest Doe & Sons, and so talks were had about the possibility of placing the unit into production, with Doe securing the manufacturing rights for himself. Eventually, an agreement was made for George Pryor to build a second frame, this time being mated at Doe's site in Alting with a pair of Fordson Power Major skid units. It was at Alting that the unit came under Doe's works manager Charles Bennett, who initiated a number of changes before the final production model. Chief among these changes was the steering rams, now being specially made by the Rain Foundry in Braintree. Less than 3 weeks later, Doe's demonstration tractor was ready to be shown to the public. The Doe machine, now dubbed Doe's Dual Power, found itself at over 20 feet long. Whilst appearing ungainly, the machine was surprisingly agile with a turning circle of 21 feet, 5 feet less than the standard major unit. This was in thanks to the turntable, which allowed the units to turn at almost 90 degrees of each other. The dual power was also blessed with near-perfect weight distribution. However, not all parts of the tractor were as perfect as both Pryor and Doe would have liked. Gear selection of the front unit found itself to be a chore, as the driver physically had to go and select the desired gear on the front unit, whilst the high-low lever remained in neutral, before returning and selecting the same gear ratio on the rear unit. The driver then re-engaged the front unit again via a lever that ran across the bonnet to the high-low lever, before engaging the rear's high-low lever and moving forwards. For reverse manoeuvres, it was found to be easier to simply use the reverse gear of the rear unit, with the front remaining in neutral. Luckily, clutch operation of both units was synchronised through the single clutch pedal on the rear. Eventually, it was found that optimum running was achieved by setting the front unit to a slightly higher speed than the rear, with the front essentially pulling the rear unit along. The first demonstration was held in 1958 at Boyton Hall, and prove the Dough's wet weather capabilities. With engineering and production duties now handed over to Dough, George Pryor continued to receive royalties for each unit sold, which reportedly just about covered the costs of his original patents. Dough's first sale came in October 1958 to a farmer in Suffolk, with another unit being supplied to Suffolk that November before closing the year with a unit in Essex. Two more sales to Essex farmers in February 1959 were made before Dough decided to make some modifications to the design, and so took the machine off the market. Firstly, the steering received a design change due to high sensitivity that had resulted in at least one damaged machine, and dramatic steering throughout the 6 currently produced. A change to a Vickers pump took the steering range from a few inches to 1.5 turns lock to lock, allowing for much greater control. Finally, the name Dough Dual Power was dropped in favour of Dough's Dual Drive, more commonly known as the Triple D. The Triple D made its return debut at the June 1959 Essex show, sporting its new steering system, new name, and a new colour scheme featuring orange bonnets. Dough had brochures scattered across the farming press, with the first sale being made on August 1st, 1959, with another 2 being sold to Russia and 1 to Sweden. In total, 11 units left the works in 1959, with much interest in the machine, but few farmers seeing it as more than a novel concept. Many just didn't have farms big enough to require such a machine. 3 more units were sold by March 1960 before Dough finally wrapped production up of the early models, with only 20 having been manufactured to date. By this point, the health and safety officials had become concerned regarding the method of changing gear on the front unit, with the original link rod method being changed to a master cylinder and slave unit. Whilst Dough's engineers were at work to replace the high-low mechanism, they tasked themselves with inventing a method for changing gear on the front unit from the rear. Devised by Charles Bennett, the eventual method consisted of a lever and pedal arrangement fitted to the rear unit, allowing for selection of the first and second gears via the lever and the third and fourth via the pedal. With the issue of gear selection resolved, the Triple D was relaunched in May 1960 at a base price of £1,950, roughly £37,000 today. Initially, the new hydraulic change was offered as an option for £75 extra, but eventually was made standard on all Triple Ds sold. Another option available at the relaunch was a remote starter for starting the front unit from the driving position on the rear, charged at £25. Standard Triple Ds came with 11x36 tyres, but buyers had the option to change to 12x38s for greater speed, clearance and traction. Cage wheels were also available for £84 a pair from Kemper in Germany and allowed for tight turning. Finally, the option of steel wheels were available for improved traction, but were found to cause expensive failures over extended use. Rather interestingly, the original design of the Triple D allowed for conversion of the machine back to 2 separate tractors for dry summer months when the advantage held by the machine was not so great. However, only one conversion kit for this purpose was actually ever sold. The new and improved Triple D found itself earning second place at the Royal Show that year, and from the end of 1960 the skid units were changed to Fordson's new Super Major. These new Super Majors brought with them the introduction of a number of improvements hydraulically, alongside locking diffs and disc brakes. Up until now, Dough had been using 2 complete majors to produce the machine, managing to off-sell the parts no longer required after the conversion. But with the introduction of the new Super Major, Dough started purchasing units directly from Ford minus their front wheels, axles and hydraulics, and sporting an uprated radiator. With all its upgrades, The new model found itself being demonstrated across the world, with eventually 28 Triple Ds being exported as far as Israel, South Africa, Russia, Denmark, Sweden, Austria, Germany and Spain. One Irish farmer supposedly refused to pay for the cost of delivery by lorry to Fishguard Harbour in Wales for shipping, instead taking on the 300-mile journey from Essex himself. However, it wasn't long until the Triple D was demonstrating itself across the UK once again, before catching the attention of a South Dakota farmer, Ralph Christensen, at Smithfield's show. This meeting resulted in the first of 4 Triple Ds to cross the Atlantic in 1961, number 210, with Ralph being so impressed that he eventually set up a US distribution company trading under Tandem Tractors Incorporated. This led to a further 3 units eventually finding their way to the United States in February 1962, with one believed to still exist. Back home, and despite its price having risen to £2,350, the Triple D was steadily proving itself to be a highly capable machine, boasting great speed and manoeuvrability, alongside pulling power that not only shone in the field, but also found one unit being drafted into road haulage duties for construction of the M1 motorway extension. Maintenance of the Triple D was also usually best left to the service engineers, as whilst the Triple D was supplied with tools for the necessary adjustments, many found a lack of clearance to perform the tasks outside of a workshop, and most big tasks were a 2-man operation. It was also quickly found that mechanical costs would double that of a usual tractor, because any mechanical parts were essentially duplicated. However, any major mechanical breakdowns often found themselves rooted with the Fordson skid units themselves, rather than any conversion work that had been completed by Doe. A report by the National Institute of Agricultural Engineering found reason to doubt the Doe's suitability for work in hilly areas, but little effect was had on sales, with a large majority of units remaining in the flatlands of eastern England, primarily Essex. The final version of the Triple D was launched at 1963's Royal Show, this time sporting a bluey-grey colour and the new Performance Supermajor skid units, putting out 54 horsepower each for a total of 108. A new basic list price of £2,450 was now teamed with a list of options, including an optional heavy-duty linkage assembly for £100 and a pair of cabs for all-weather working. The few months following the Royal Show proved the most demand for the Triple D, with 60 units leaving Alting between July and December 1963. High sales were driven by a wet autumn, and now Doe was considering a new 18,000 square foot factory dedicated to Triple D production. However, this factory would never see the light of day, thanks to the following year's events. In May 1964, Doe found themselves far behind the Iron Curtain after being invited to the British Agricultural Exhibition in Moscow, with their stand being visited by Nikita Khrushchev himself, and eventually securing another Russian machine sale. However, Ford, who had been directly providing the skid units to Doe for some time, shocked the company when they announced that they would no longer be producing Fordson tractors at Dagenham, with production switching to the new Ford 5000 at Basildon. With the loss of their power units, Doe found themselves dispatching their last Triple D to a dealer in Lincolnshire on October 3, 1964, finally bringing an end to Triple D production after an accepted 289 machines. Exactly 1 week later, on October 10th, Ernest Doe found himself alongside 6,000 other Ford tractor dealers at Radio City Music Hall in New York to see the unveiling of Ford's new range of worldwide tractors. Designed for simultaneous assembly at sites in the USA, UK and Belgium, the star of the new 6X range was the Ford 5000, a machine capable of producing 65 horsepower across 8 speeds. This was the machine that had been designed to replace the Supermajor and Dexter models produced by Dagenham and would be of top interest to Doe. Whilst being an ultimately much improved and more stylish machine than that it replaced, the fact that the 5000 was a completely new design meant that Doe would need to readapt their frames to mate with it. Doe found themselves with little time to make the necessary changes to the Tandem tractor, but decided that the new design of subframe would introduce production jigs, ensuring an accuracy not seen on the previous Triple Ds. In fact, it is thought that no two Triple D frames were alike, with minor adjustments on each machine making each one unique. Doe also took time to make changes to the turntable, incorporating 2 rows of ball bearings into the design, and reducing the steering rams from 2 per side to just 1, now with 1 pulling and 1 pushing during turning manoeuvres. Doe also made changes to the front gear selector mechanism to account for the rise to 8 gears. However, thanks to the rather simplistic design, they were able to make the Smithfield Show of December 1964, where the UK launch of the new 6X range was to take place. Alongside the standard Ford 5000, the new Doe 130 was exhibited for the first time, sporting a base price of £2,850 and an incredible 130 horsepower, hence its designation. Despite the higher price, the new Doe 130 drew great interest from the crowd thanks to the reputation previously built by the Triple D and the addition of an extra 30 horsepower. 73 machines left Alting across 1965, with 14 heading for export, and of those, 8 for the Nigerian Sugarcane Company, the largest single order of Doe tractors. Whilst a significant improvement over the Triple D in both looks and performance, the 130 was not free of faults. However, as with the Triple D, these were usually traced back to the skid unit rather than any of Doe's handiwork. Main failures were often traced back to the newly introduced 8-speed gearbox, which was more of a 7-speed due to the wide ratio spacing and significant overlap between the 4th and 5th gears. Ford would eventually change the gearbox into a true 8-speed, with the change making it onto later Doe 130s. However, one major series of failures that could be traced back to Doe involved the steering, which with the reduction to 2 rams had become too weak to actually turn the 130. Demonstrators had noticed that front units were impossible to climb out of furrows and that the extra stress on the rams caused strains on the power steering pumps. Less than 1 year after it first went on sale, Doe's engineers were being called out to pump failures roughly every 7 to 10 days, leading Doe to reintroduce the original 4-ram setup as per the Triple D's design. Come 1965, Ford would announce its new Selecto-Speed gear selection as an option on its range of tractors, allowing for clutchless changes on the go. Doe saw the opportunity to build a model with this feature and announced it would build 2 130 prototypes with Selecto-Speed for the 1966 season. However, with issues in synchronizing the gears across both units, and even experienced operators unable to tell if both machines were matching, Doe had only one Selecto-Speed produced by July 1966's Royal Show. The new machine variant carried a price of £3,550, whilst the standard 130 now stood at £3,200, a significant rise since its introduction. Alongside this, Doe was debuting a new heavy-duty implement lift assembly for the 130, priced at £160. However, with the Selecto-Speed system being poorly received by farmers on the home market, only the one shown at the Royal Show was sold to a local farmer. By May 1968, Doe had produced exactly 170 machines, with the final one being delivered to none other than George Pryor, the inventor who started it all, on May 29, 1968. The final curtain call for Doe's tandem tractors came in September of that year, when the last of 3 new Doe 150s left Alting. The 150 was the merging of 2 Ford 5000s from the new 6Y range, launched for April with 75 horsepower, 3/4 of the original Triple D's output from just one machine. The only changes to the machine, besides its price to a now hefty £4,200, was the increase in power and some minor styling changes introduced by Ford. Ultimately, the tractor market had started to catch up in the horsepower race, and whilst not matching those Tandem machines on a like-for-like basis, it was becoming harder for farmers to choose what was essentially two tractors over one slightly less powerful machine. It was also the victim of the newly proposed safety cab legislation due to take place in 1970, which, whilst okay for Ford and the standard 5000, would not automatically be approved for the increased weight of those machines. Seeing the writing on the wall, Doe called time on their Tandem tractors, and ultimately it was not a hard decision for the company. Competitive pricing on their models had allowed little profit for investment, with Alan Doe himself admitting, "I am sure that we are better at distributing machinery than manufacturing it." Ernest Doe & Sons returned to being solely a distributor once more, but still remained open to conversion and restoration work of its former machines, with many of the original run having passed through their doors once again for upkeep. Whilst there have been quite a few homemade versions of the dual drive, Triple D and 130s, there is not many machines that can draw quite the attention or fondness by their mere appearance, and are legendary machines in the eyes of many enthusiasts. Thank you for watching. This was a long one to produce, so if you enjoyed, remember to leave a like and subscribe for future videos.